Look at this. Damn. I feel like I'm on an island over here. All right, welcome everybody. Thank you all for coming out and hanging out with us. We have an amazing panel. I've had the opportunity to spend some time with each of these folks. They are building amazing businesses and running really powerful organizations. We have, as Mia mentioned, Kim Larsen, Director of Product Data Science at Shopify, Pauline, Director of Growth at Warmies, and Curtis Matsko, CEO of Portland Leather Goods. He's got one fan that he hired to come, which is amazing. Good work, Curtis. We're going to dig in deep here. I would love to understand, and we'll start with you, Curtis. What role does data play in your organization today?
You know, the whole talk is about data-driven organization. And when they told me that, I said, I can speak on anything, but I hated that data-driven organization. I love data, but I do not want to tell all my employees, focus on data, 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 and more data. Because if you tell somebody one thing to do, they will think that's the most important thing. They will focus on nothing but data. And I'll give them something simple, and they'll add more data, and add more data, and add more data. As the CEO of a company of now 1,400 employees, I don't need more data. I need that information put in a way that we can do something with it. So I like to be a smart company, and data is really, really important for that. I want to be able to see things in a very simple way, because I have told this to my employees 100 times. Data does nothing unless it helps me make an actionable judgment and a decision because of that data. Otherwise, it is just a bunch of, they always say, hey, I made that report. I spent 3 weeks on it. I emailed it to you. Great. I didn't read it. I don't understand it. I will do nothing. Nothing has changed in our entire company. So they need to understand what they're talking about and be able to find the deep data, and then they need to do something that not everyone can do, is simplify it down and tell it to me in a way that I can do something with it. So data, very important. Simple data, actionable decisions, that's really the key.
We still invited him to come out, even though he said this was going to be a horrible thing. So throw it over to Kim, who runs a data organization. Within the Shopify ecosystem, how do you, in one Shopify and within the brands that are leveraging Shopify, think about how they can use data strategically?
Yeah, can you hear me? Yeah. So I'll just talk about the world outside of Shopify for now and the Shopify ecosystem, which is really e-commerce. And I was thinking about this on the plane down because I know you'd ask. And I think the best way to frame this, I don't know if this is how everybody thinks about it, but I think it's a good way to think about it. There was a Reforge article a couple of years back about the race car analogy. I don't know, have you guys seen that? And it kind of makes a parallel from growth to race cars. So you have the engine. Engine would be like marketing. You put fuel into it, which is money, and you get new customers or repeat purchases out the other way. And then you have fine-tuning of the engine, which in a race car would be like oil, et cetera, and fine-tuning. In this case, it could be your conversion rate, your retention rate. If you put in a bunch of fuel into your engine and it's all coming out the other way, it's not really working. And then last one, you have turbo boost, which are sort of one-time things you do. So if you think about analytics, what I see is that more and more people are covering all of these three parts. You have marketing attribution for the engine, you track your retention rate, you track your spikes, your discounts, et cetera. But in addition to that, you're noticing the more sophisticated methods that were really mainly for enterprise companies 10, 20 years ago are moving, quote unquote, down market. So for example, incrementality is making its way into marketing attribution in a big way. I see more and more people doing experimentation to figure out how can they move the needle on retention, et cetera. So that's kind of where I see things going, these more sophisticated methods moving down market and people covering all components of that race car analogy.
And Pauline, I think you've been at a couple organizations recently where you're obviously coming in, driving growth, looking at the data that lives there today and making strategic decisions. Can you share a specific example where you use data to quickly drive growth and kind of change a company's perspective on how they were delivering?
Yeah, I mean, just to echo Curtis's sentiments, like you can have a ton of data, but if you don't ask the right questions, it doesn't even matter. And one of the big things that we focused on was incrementality. You know, Google is notoriously, you know, an important channel, but we did kind of a holdout test, for example, with our search campaigns where we found very little material impact on actual acquisition. So we were able to, you know, still maintain a decent presence, but reinvest that in top of funnel channels that were actually driving growth, which, you know, I've been a part of a lot of lean teams, and new customers are kind of the #1 thing to focus on, so, yeah.
So we just had two folks mention incrementality. I think how has measurement and data and metrics you all are using evolved throughout the years?
Well, throughout the years I'm going to grab onto that one. We're like an original triple whale, and they have taken us from 16, 32 million, 64, 128, now to 200 million, okay? That's all triple whale. So if somebody talks to me about some other stuff, I say, why the hell do I need them? Triple whale, it made me successful, and it does everything I need. When I talk about I want something simple I can take action on, that doesn't mean my people don't understand the depth of what it does. And they say, hey, at 200 million, a percent is $2 million. That starts to become real money. So incrementally changing and understanding and testing. So when I talk about triple whale and other things give me a simplicity of taking action, but my people can then verify that information they're doing and saying, let's get this. And those little things stacked on top of each other, that's truly what makes a company successful. As an entrepreneur, I want the big flashy thing. I want to blow something up. I want to change direction. I want the new product. And fortunately, my chief marketing officer is smarter than I am and says, thank you very much, pats me on the head and says, how about if we do these small things that over a month and a year add up to what we need to do? And magically, by the end of the year, we've reached all of our goals and made all of our profit. So it's the small things that matter, even though in my mind, I want to blow something up, I want to change something big, and I want a big party.
And Pauline, I think from you know, coming into an organization, what are some of the biggest mistakes or blind spots you see brands have?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just speak from my own example. You know, not at this company, but a previous company, I think we over-indexed on the wrong metrics, focusing only on click-based attribution, which, you know, the way people are purchasing is changing. There's a ton of view-through cross-device that you can't see. And so we weren't intaking qualitative data. We were optimizing towards the last click. And this is right when iOS 14 hit. So everything top of funnel was starting to look really awful. You know, when we started spending down funnel and kind of shooting ourselves in the foot with a flywheel of new customer acquisition. So, you know, having data alone isn't the most important. It's knowing what matters to your stage in growth in your business.
And Kim, thinking about data infrastructure, if there were processes you would have implemented earlier, or you know, things that you think about from a Shopify perspective, what would they be?
Yeah, so I think Shopify is probably a little different than most e-commerce companies in terms of the data stack, but of all the e-commerce companies I've talked to over the years, either advised or worked at directly or talked to, I think there's one piece of advice that I always give, right? So early on, when you set up your company, obviously, you know, you're in a rush to get stuff done, and you want to move quickly. So it's good to take on some tech debt or some data debt, right? That is a good thing. You don't need to be perfect from day one. But I see in a lot of cases, people drag it for too long, to the point where you're in a deep hole in terms of your data infrastructure. And now it is too late to change unless you're in a situation where you can take your data team off grid for, say, 3 months to fix it. I think that's a hard sell in most cases. So one thing I always, move fast, but slow down a little bit and almost resist what you can do to set up your infrastructure correctly, set up your API connectors correctly, structure your data warehouse in the right way. Try not to build things you can buy. I think nowadays, you can from anything from the API connectors to the data warehousing to scheduling your queries, et cetera. There are tools for all of this, for monitoring your pipelines. Use all of that for attribution, et cetera. Don't try to build it. but do avoid too much tech debt in the beginning, because you're not going to be able to dig yourself out of that hole.
Yeah, and I think Curtis mentioned, his brand growing with Triple Whale. I think our platform has had to evolve as brands like Portland Leather Goods have evolved with us. So it's been powerful to have you all pushing us. Curtis mentioned he brings intuition. His CMO brings strategy and data to kind of drive the business forward.
Annoyingly,
Perfect.
he brings that.
How do y'all think about hiring with that in mind? You all mentioned like using intuition and bringing your ideas to the table and not getting slowed down by data, but I think there's a balance there of having people that can quickly make decisions but have the intuition to go forward.
I wish I had handed you that question, because that is the perfect question. We were talking about that earlier. If you are in an interview with me, it is the weirdest interview you've ever had. Because everyone else comes in and like, here's my resume. I'm like, I did not look at your resume. I do not want to know what you did in the past. I want to know who you are. I throw something at them that makes them think and say something in a different way. Because I do not want the people that every other company wants. I want to win. And the winners are very rare. And how do you find that? There's got to be something special. They've got to be broken just enough to have a chip on their shoulder that they want to prove something to the world. They have to have something about them that says, you son of a bitch. I say to people, first thing in the interview, the odds are against you. You're not gonna make it. We only hire the best. And you see some people shrink and some people sit up and they get a fire and they say, I'm gonna take over the world. I'm gonna show you, you jerk. And I love that. Those are the people, and they have to have a sense of humor. I had a party at my house in Mexico, and we had about 18 employees, and somebody who was not in our company was there, and they said, do you know how lucky you are to have such amazing employees? And I said, luck? I worked 8 years choosing these people. I had over 2,000 interviews. I had to fire the people I thought were right and who were wrong. You have to get this magical mix of people if you're gonna go on a journey and you're gonna try to take over the world. So that's been really successful. So thank you for that question.
Yeah, absolutely. Pauline, anything to add?
I think we were talking about failure a little bit, how it's not real, I don't think. I think for me, the people that I love to work with are people who, you're gonna act on intuition and make decisions, but are you gonna iterate and learn from it? So I love to meet people who are not afraid to fail, who are really creative with their ideas. Sometimes it'll be a complete flop, but sometimes it's a crazy success, going viral on social. You have to have like a certain personality to try things and think outside of the box.
Yeah, this is a question I get a lot, like who should I hire? I'm talking about hiring data people. What do they look like? Where do I find them? But again, we can go back to the race car analogy, right? In the early stages of your company, you're relying on a lot of turbo boost to get things going, right? Once things are going, the growth engine kicks in. Now, it's a different skill set you need in the beginning versus fine-tuning the growth engine. So as your company grows, you initially hire generalists that are just savvy, smart, give them a project, see what they can do with it. That's what I used to do. Then when you get to the growth stage, you start to have some specialists. Maybe you have someone who's really good at media mix modeling or experimentation or whatever it might be. You probably have someone who's a little bit better at data engineering, et cetera, et cetera. And depending on your business model, maybe you need to add machine learning onto that if that's part of the equation. But so you're not hiring the same people at each stage in the beginning. Hire smart, scrappy, generalist, then specialize as you go along.
So you mentioned specialize as you go along. I think that's really key. Curtis, you have 1,400 employees. How do you get the organizations to work together? So McCoy comes to you and says, I've got this data point that tells me A. We need products B. You've got the warehouse right behind you. How do we get it all to work together?
Okay. Not the way most people think. If you're gonna work higher up in our companies, you better be able to communicate. And that means when you have an idea, you tell somebody that idea. I have my WhatsApp, and everybody important has my WhatsApp, and they call me as soon as they come up with an idea. There is no, let's have a meeting next Thursday to see if you like this idea. Let's talk about it right now. We had an employee one time, and they're talking to McCoy, who's our chief marketing officer, and they're like, how do I set something up with Curtis? And he said, he's walking right there. Grab him, take 30 seconds, tell him the idea. Don't spend a lot of time. So you deal with people who can communicate. If you have something, you go fix it. That's number one. Second one is immediacy. Who actually does things fast? I was listening to a CMO of another company. I love this. They got a new creative director. They spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on this big video shoot. They had 8 weeks to edit it. And the new creative director said, we're doing it by tomorrow, no one goes home. And by the next morning, they had an award, it won awards, became very famous, and they did it in a night. And they said that changed everybody's mindset of how fast things can actually get done. So can you communicate when you have the idea? Number two, can you do things immediate? And the number one thing I tell people in our company, if you're talking data, is know the numbers in your head. I always ask my people, what is this? And they say, let me look at my computer. And I say, too late. Our brains are these magical devices that solve problems 24 hours a day. And if the number's in your computer, your brain cannot work on the solution. I'm obsessive, so if I'm working on something in the shower, in the bathtub, when I'm walking, when I'm sleeping, and all of a sudden I read a passage on LinkedIn from some jerk I don't even like, and I say, dang it, that's it. That answers the question that's in my brain because I know, because my brain is searching for it. If that was locked away in my computer, I do not know it. So when I talk about how important triple whale is and complex data, you also have to know certain numbers in your head. So your brain, when you're walking around and meeting the amazing people at this conference, you're talking to people who can solve that for you. So a little ramble there, sorry about that.
No, it was great. Pauline, and how do you work cross-functionally? Obviously, you're running one part of the organization, but you need to work and collaborate with everyone to execute.
Yeah, how do we work cross-functionally? We work cross-functionally, so over-communicating. Like Curtis said, we'll just hop on Slack. We're fully remote, so we'll just huddle all the time and always be chatting. How it plays out to data-driven is transparency, I think, and accountability. So, really just sharing out what happened at the end of a campaign or a result, very transparently with one another to foster more learnings. Not penalizing people for things that don't work, but having a core value of creativity and curiosity has been pretty paramount for us.
And Kim, I want to transition a bit, but obviously you're thinking about product data. How do you see either trends emerging in data or technologies emerging that you're excited about in the industry and space?
Yeah, I actually had some thoughts on the previous one, but I'll address your questions.
You take that first, please.
Quickly on the trends. I mean, the obvious one is it's not even worth saying because we're all thinking it is AI. But I want to try to dig a little deeper into this. Obviously I saw you guys have like an agent too now in Triple Whale. Did I see that? But so I'll kind of take the product stuff off the table. But just in terms of workflow, man, the AI stuff is super useful if you're in data. Not only does it make existing data humans faster, because you can use it as a code assistant, et cetera, but also old washed up managers like myself can actually get in and start coding more again. So I don't have to ask people, can you pull me this? And I can just do it, And then I also see people, this is still a little early, I would say, but I see people outside of data using, say, sort of like an MCP or something like that to communicate with the data warehouse and answer some questions. I think it's still a little early. If you're doing something important, you probably want to run that by a data human. But I think AI, in terms of making us more efficient on the data front, you don't have to remember all the syntax, getting better at coding. It's not coding for you. I think it's helping you code. I think it's super useful. And then, of course, again, incrementality, experimentation. There's so much happening in this space. I'm so happy to see this. I actually think that going back to first time I dealt with marketing measurement in 2003, nothing was digital, it was all offline. I actually think people were quite good at incrementality back then because you had to, because it was offline, right? Then there came a period of measurement complacency where we all got lazy because we had last click. Oh yeah, the number is right there, I can see it in the database. But it was wrong, right? You have to do something else than that. And now it's coming back full-time, full-blown. It's great to see. One last question. I just want to say, Curtis, to your point, you don't actually have to be data-driven. You just have to be data-informed. But I would just say one thing. A lot of times people ask me, how do I make sure that my stakeholders listen to me? They're not listening to me. I'm like, maybe we make a process. Maybe we set up a ritual where you have to check these five. Then you already lost, right? Process is almost never the way to fix anything. But I tell data people, if there are data people in here, just do awesome work, have opinions on what you do, actually stand by the work, and don't be like, well, it sort of says this, and if you look at it like this, maybe, and it depends. No, just say what you think. And I have done that even far into my career, and someone would say, yeah, thanks, Kim, but like, yeah, I don't believe you. I think I can do twice as much. And I'm like, okay. But if you're in a merit-based company with ownership, my answer would be, well, then you own that. Do you know what I mean? You think you can do 2x what I said, you own it, we're on the same team. Let's go do it. And I don't know where I was going with the end, but that was just to address the question before. Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
Just they put us on other ends of the couch here because his first part more about the tech and the databases, I didn't understand a word that he said. He's so smart that he knows stuff that I never want to know, okay? I do believe this. It was mentioned that there's a lot of remote people in the world. And I'm gonna tell you this, please, get off your computer sometimes and go meet an actual human and learn about them and what they do. I spent a winter in a Zen monastery, me and 8 Buddhist monks on the top of a mountain. And we had these things called shishins, where you actually, 8 hours of meditation a day, you didn't speak, you didn't even look at somebody else, right? And your brain goes crazy. And you think the breakthrough is going to be when you're meditating. Does that make sense? You're sitting there 8 hours, come on, baby, break on through. The breakthrough always happens when you're doing the dishes. The breakthrough always happens when you're out of the blackberry bushes and you're doing that. Your breakthroughs will not come when you're staring at your computer. That's when you feed. That's the practice. That's putting the information in. The changes in your life, something that snaps and says, that's it, that comes in real life with real people and someone you don't expect saying something you did not expect them to say. So we're already go down the funnel of our algorithm from work and our entertainment on our computer. Please, I love it too. Get off it more, talk to people, and you are gonna have more breakthroughs at work and your business than you can possibly imagine.
Love it. Love it. Pauline, anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've met someone randomly and one sentence that they've said has, it was just something I would never have thought of. And that, set our trajectory in strategy just to test into, and then, that really worked. But multiple times, just one-liners that I could never have figured out looking at a computer, so.
That happened earlier. We were talking, and you said you're a historian.
I majored in history.
You majored in history, and I said, historians and English lit writers, they're the smartest people. You want people who can think like that. And I immediately liked her, and I'm like, wow, that's something. We started talking, and ideas came through, and pretty soon I was talking about tariffs and how they link up with everything, right? It is people, it's connections, it's taking the fluidity of all that you think you know in your brain and putting it out in the world and A/B testing it with other human beings.
All right, let's do that now. We're gonna open it up to a bit of a Q&A. I think we have someone coming with a mic. Domina right there. We want to have some dialogue, some conversations, and get the juices flowing. Feel free to raise your hand, ask a question. If not, I'm going to call on people. We've got one.
Hello.
Hi.
If you were to whittle down all the KPIs you look at to the top 3, what are the top 3 KPIs that you could look at to evaluate the health of your business?
Customer acquisition, obviously. We do something that's different than a lot of people. We sell a physical product, and we have 50% every month as returning customers. So we need 40,000 new customers every month, but We run that thing so well that it's 48, 52, 49, 51, 50-50, and we run that. Because those returning customers are the key to everything you do. Because you can learn how much it is to get a new customer. And you can do the math and say, we are first customer profitable. Well, yippee. Your profit is made when those people come back again and again and again. Again. If you don't look at this as a holistic thing, front to back, every one of them is the ecosystem, then you're missing out. So I'm only gonna give you two. How much does it cost you to get that new customer, and what % are coming back? And please, for the love of God, make profit. Please do not put your company in danger by being in fear all the time and not telling the truth about your business. I've met with these business owners. They don't even tell their own company. They ask me, what should I do? And I say, don't wait 3 years after you've been losing money before you start digging out. So please, raise your prices, get better, hire better people, and make money.
Pauline, anything to add?
I'm aligned. New customer acquisition for us, we're 80-20. We're still high growth. So making sure that new customers are coming in at efficiency, MER, obviously. We don't care where they come from as long as they come. And yeah, profitability at the end of the day, so.
Yeah, I agree with all that. Again, going back to the race car, you have a growth engine, you put things into it. If stuff is just leaking out the other side, you're not going to have a long-term growth, right? You can model that out pretty easily. I think there's another thing. I like the profitability angle. You really have to make sure you get payback on your ad spend within some reasonable amount. In the heyday of the COVID period, there's a lot of like, well, you know, it takes me 8 years to get the money back and it doesn't look too good. But, you know, I have viral loop and people will tell their friends and they'll tell their friends and they'll tell their friends and ultimately they'll all pay back. Maybe, but you can't bank on that kind of stuff. You need to see the payback on paper within some period. I would also just say, for those of you, if you're not doing it already, the biggest recommendation I could ever make is build a cohort bottom-up model of your business. So customers come in and they have some sort of retention curve or repeat curve. Build that cohort model, even if you don't know all the components, just build it out. And it allows you to start playing around with the different parameters in your business, see how much they matter. You'll see that retention matters, but you'll also notice that retention is hard to move, right? But if your acquisition cost, to the point earlier, if that's not good, that means your main growth engine is broken and you need to find another growth engine, and that's difficult. So yeah. Basically just repeating what you guys said.
Yeah, and just to circle back to attribution and triple whale, making sure you have a source of truth that's outside of ad platforms that are incentivized to get you to spend more is minor detail.
Awesome. Have a source of truth and every now and then question your source of truth. Yeah. Where did that number come from? We're doing all of our projections on this number. Could that number, where did you guys get that? Oh, well, it's just sitting around. I found it on my freaking computer, so do that. He always talks about a race car. We started our company in Portland. I always kind of thought it was like the mystery mobile from Scooby-Doo, and they left the doors out the back, and cash is flying out the back as we're driving away from the ghost. So I'm like, guys, batten down the hatches. I know it's Portland. I know you're smoking pot. Close the thing up. Let's try to keep more cash in this thing.
Thank you. Any other questions? We got one up front here.
Hello. This is something that bothers me often, which is you said taking action and insight, which I think is very valuable. I've come from very large organizations and now sit in a very, very small startup organization. How do you balance the desire and need for look back, which people spend a lot of time on, an inordinate amount of time, versus taking action and insight? So sitting here right now, it's like, every week, I would rather spend the 1 hour taking 3 insights that I can turn into action, because that action is going to require work and time to then go implement. But I'd rather do that and then go for the next week, hey, I did these 3 things and look at this turnaround that happened, versus we spend hours just reporting the news. And it drives me crazy.
It is brilliant. There are 2 books in the world that have changed my life that I never read the book, I only read the title. And one is What Got You Here Won't Get You There. So the past is irrelevant if you want to get someplace else. The other one is 10x is easier than 2x. And both of those titles say what the hell they are. Everybody looks at the history and says, we are this, if we do more of this, we'll get there. I say, no, that's what the historical data with all of our mistakes said. What's the ideal? We actually did something called the ideal marketing plan this year, where I talked to my CMO and I said, how do you get to $200 billion? He said, well, January has to have this many launches, this many new products, this many new customers to fill the, and we created, and he said, if you can give me those products, if you give me this money and this team, we can do that. And we went through the first quarter 2.9 million ahead of what we thought we were going to do. So you're not doing what historical data tells you can do. That's bullshit, that's in the past. You're doing what is the ideal state? What could we do if we were better? And you create from there backwards. That's a fantastic question.
All right. Thank you, Pauline, Kim, and Curtis. Appreciate all the insights. Thank you all for joining us and hope you enjoy the rest of the event.